who has chosen to join us today for the opportunity to have our spirituality nurtured. But let us jump right into this Transfiguration Sunday and listen as Randy tells the story.
This reading is from Luke chapter 9, verses 28 to 36. About 8 days after saying this, he climbed the mountain to pray, taking Peter, John, and James along. While he was in prayer, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became blinding white. At once 2 men were there talking with him. They turned out to be Moses and Elijah, and what a glorious appearance they made. They talked over his exodus, the one Jesus was to complete in Jerusalem. Meanwhile, Peter and those with him were slumped over in sleep. When they came to, rubbing their eyes, they saw Jesus in his glory, and the 2 men standing with him. When Moses and Elijah had left, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, this is a great moment. Let's build 3 memorials, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He blurted this out without thinking. While he was babbling on like this, a light, radiant cloud enveloped them, and they found themselves buried in the cloud and became deeply aware of God. Then there was a voice out of the cloud. "This is my Son, the chosen. Listen to him." When the sound of the voice died away, they saw Jesus there alone. They were speechless, and they continued speechless, said not one thing to anyone during those days of what they had seen.
The story is told about a man who took his new hunting dog on a trial hunt one day. After a while, he managed to shoot a duck and it fell into the lake. The dog walked over the water, picked up the duck, and brought it to his master. And the man was stunned. He didn't know what to think. He shot another duck, and again it fell into the lake, and again the dog walked over the water and brought it back to the master. Hardly daring to believe his eyes and not wanting to be thought a total fool, he told no one about it. But the next day, he called his neighbor to come shooting with him. As on the previous day, he shot a duck and it fell into the lake. The duck walked over the water and got it. His neighbor didn't say a word. Several more ducks got shot that day, and each time the dog walked over the water to retrieve them. And each time the neighbor said nothing, and neither did the owner of the dog. Finally, unable to contain himself any longer, the owner asked his neighbor, "Do you notice anything strange about my dog?" "Well, yes," replied the neighbor, rubbing his chin and thinking a bit. "Come to think of it, I do. Your dog doesn't seem to know how to swim." The story of the Transfiguration of Jesus is a difficult one to talk about, especially every year. The experience is not something that we can really identify with. It just doesn't click with us, just as seeing the dog walking on water didn't really click with the neighbor in the story I just told. So maybe that's why we want to just leave it there, to be that mysterious, glory-filled moment it was, and move on to what comes after the story and see how it all ties in. So that's what we're going to do today. Wonder at the strangeness of what has happened, and then move on to the more practical. But first, let us make quiet our minds and hearts that have been disturbed certainly by the events in the wider world this week, but perhaps also by the things going on in our personal lives. Let's sing 381, Spirit of Life. how the mountain was quiet, but it was there that 4 friends were invited to gather. And then suddenly Jesus was transformed. Voices and images surrounded the mountain, and the friends of Jesus were filled with awe. And then Jesus returned to his friends, comforting them, and the mountaintop was quiet again. But it's hectic below. A father needs help for his sick son. So let's prepare ourselves to hear all about it. Let's sing number 104, We Have Come at Christ's Own Bidding. How good, God, to be here, knowing that your Spirit is with us as we take the time to enliven our faith life. In prayer, in song, and reflection, we will seek to go deeper into what the Word has to offer us in these difficult and testing times, in our personal lives, in our community, in our world, and in our church. So give us open minds and hearts to receive and ponder on this wisdom, that we may become more committed and faithful followers, recognized as such by those we come into contact with in the coming week. And now to this prayer we add the one that binds us together as a loving community. story. It doesn't take much to visualize what's happening. We may even have been there.
This reading is from Luke chapter 9, verses 37 to 43. When they came down off the mountain the next day, a big crowd was there to meet them. A man called out from the crowd, "Please, please, teacher, take a look at my son. He's my only child. Often a spirit seizes him. Suddenly he's screaming, thrown into convulsions, his mouth foaming. And then it beats him black and blue before he leaves. I asked your disciples to deliver him, but they couldn't." Jesus said, "What a generation. No sense of God. No focus to your lives. How many times do I have to go over these things? How much longer do I have to put up with this? Bring your son here." While he was coming, the demon slammed him to the ground and threw him into convulsions. Jesus stepped in, ordered the vile spirit gone, healed the boy, and handed him back to his father. They all shook their heads in wonder, astonished at God's greatness, God's majestic greatness. In these sacred words of old, may we hear the Spirit speaking to us anew.
Yes, we might want to stay on top of the mountaintop. It would be great there. We could just build another comfy hut for ourselves with great windows to enjoy the view. And we'd be right up there next to God. What could possibly be better? This would be a great final destination. But it doesn't happen that way. Reality and the demands of the real world say we're going to have to come down sooner or later. So maybe we should be more concerned about what happened after Jesus and Peter and James and John came down from the mountain. How could it be any different? They came into the mess and the stress of humanity, someplace most of us are quite aware of. While Peter, James, and John's minds were still probably a whirl from the transfixion, a stranger buttonholed Jesus, a father begging the Nazarene to heal his son. Was it a demon? Could be if we take how the story is related literally. More likely, and something we could more easily identify with in the Transfiguration, more likely he was suffering from an illness that caused the seizures. But regardless of scriptural interpretations, the kid was sick, the father desperate, and Jesus soon healed the lad. A 3-point story with a happy ever after ending to celebrate and then get on with life. But there is this other little storyline to consider, and it's between the great mountaintop experience and the fantastic healing. Do you remember what it was? The father had apparently sought out Jesus' disciples to heal his son, but they had failed. And now the father said to Jesus, "I begged your disciples to throw it, the demon, out, but they couldn't." How did that all happen? Did they all line up and take a try? Did the father ask for volunteers? And who stepped forward? If we think of Peter, James, and John as the big three, were these just the second string disciples, the B team, who were good, but perhaps not quite ready for the pros? Where did the father find them? At the trailhead, waiting for the others to come down, or were they waiting back at the local Starbucks? Did some among them say, "Sorry, Jesus does the healings, I just watch," because perhaps they were afraid to fail? Or maybe they belittled the father. "Clearly you and your kid don't have enough belief, or else touching his forehead and yelling for the demon to depart would have worked." Or maybe the father didn't seek the 9 remaining on the bench while the first string followed Jesus. What if the father, spying the returning Peter, James, and John first, hurried towards them with his fervent hopes? Maybe Jesus had been walking a little further behind, needing to recoup from the awesome experience and all the expectations that would come from it. Anyway, the father gets first to this terrific trio, but they're tired and cranky. Perhaps each of them attempted to fail or to help, and then they failed. So many questions with no real answers. So how do we give this story a modern twist, make it relevant for you and I? In Luke's tale of one or more of the disciples' failures, can we insert ourselves into the story? Am I or you a disciple who would also disappoint? And I can't resist wondering, when trying to find in something old something new, was it the disciples couldn't help or wouldn't help? And what about Jesus' response to the situation? The child is writhing on the ground, the father's waiting anxiously, the crowd is watching, and the disciples, first and second string, are wilting or wavering. And Jesus says, "You faithless and crooked generation, how long can I be with you and put up with you?" Now, I just tried to read it with no inflection so that you would have to imagine the tone he used. Did he yell with scorn or in an accusatory way? Should there be a question mark, an exclamation point, or neither? Or did he whisper in a gentle but frustrated voice, "You faithless and crooked generation, how long will I be here with you and put up with you?" And then maybe end with a sad smile. Perhaps really it was just a rhetorical question. I choose that Jesus whispered. After all, he just had that mountaintop experience. And here's how these two stories are tied together. Surely he was in a good mood. And let's not insert a question mark to the end of the sentence. Today I think it was a melancholy statement, muttered only loud enough for those who needed to hear it, which is me. Do you need to hear it too? I'm a crooked disciple. Are you? I would never have qualified to go up on the mountain with the first string. But I don't think I would have stayed below loitering in the village either. At least I hope I wouldn't. Any of us for that matter. Because we can help when we're called to. We have a choice whether to respond or not. We should be thinking, how can I heal? But I've never healed anyone. Any of you healed anyone? What did all those other disciples, the ones on the mountain or in the village, do when the Father approached them? I think they may have turned away from the Father for whatever reason. One probably being the fear of not having the gifts to heal the boy and disappointing the Father and letting the demon have his way with the boy. But healing can happen in unexpected ways, in unexpected places, and at unexpected times. I sit by the bedside of a dying woman. She mumbles a few words here and there, but for the most part is unresponsive. Her son is there, though, and he has a lot to say. And it's my calling to listen. As the son complains about siblings who refuse to help their dying mother, they're too busy, he says. Criticizing the care she's getting, no privacy in a ward, she has bed sores, and why can't they give her more pain medication? He wonders, can she hear him? What can he do to help her? There are the questions about what comes after, which is pretty practical stuff, and then all that unknown stuff. And then the son moves on, giving an organ recital about his own health problems and financial worries. He talks about his kids and what they're getting into, the state of his own marriage. Outside, I hear an ambulance pull up and I listen. Snow falls gently, and there is listening. Machines beep, and a voice comes over the loudspeaker saying code blue, and the talking and the listening continues. When I was doing a chaplaincy at Mount Sinai, I made a mistake one day of bending down on one knee to speak to a patient who was sitting in a chair. I was new enough that I was afraid to disturb her talking once she got on a roll, so I was down there for 45 minutes. I could barely get up after that. But it was and is my calling to listen when asked. This man, who was already grieving the loss of his mother, ended our time together with, "Thanks for listening. I really needed that." Sure, I have failed other people 100 times to the one time that I've helped. I'm a crooked disciple. Did the man whose mother was dying feel healed himself when he left to go home? I don't know, but his thanks sounded genuine, heartfelt. I went home tired, and I believe that Jesus, exhausted or exhilarated, the day's work over or just starting, turned towards a father with a sick child. Jesus stood by him, Jesus listened to him, and Jesus healed his son. And in a sense, he also healed the father. Such a huge difference there is between turning towards and turning away from a fellow traveler. And the call to listen isn't just mine, it's yours too. We needn't have too much to fear. For the most part, all we have to do is listen. And that's really all that's being asked of us, perhaps by someone we know, or even a stranger on a plane or a train, or walking on a street down in Uliskerd. We aren't required to give CPR, just to listen, that another might be heard in their anxiety by giving voice to it. It always helps to share their worries with someone who is willing to authentically listen. Have you ever noticed that in your own life? It helps. So be willing to help someone heal sometime by just listening, because we are called to be the hands, feet, and ears of Christ. And let us now give voice to the times that we haven't been good listeners. We want to celebrate God. We don't want to listen. We want to stay up on the mountaintop with Jesus and set up a festival where everyone can come and play and have a good time. We want our faith to be one of entertainment. But you have called us to listen to him. You've asked us to be ready for the journey. We cannot stay where we are, comfortable and snuggled down in the familiar. There is so much to be done. Many voices need to be listened to. So forgive us when we are stubborn and willful. Remind us that you are with us wherever we are. You call us from the mountaintop to go to the valley where there is struggle and strife, where healing is needed. Prepare us to listen to you and to others. Heal us and them. We give thanks to a generous God whose Son Jesus was both a gift and a great giver. As his followers, we should also find our deepest joy in giving, and that's why we give this offering cheerfully. And may the words of our mouths, the meditations of our hearts, and now the giving of this offering all show our thankfulness to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Just 3 announcements. We are going to go back to church next week. So that is March 6th, which is the first day of Lent. We trust that everyone will be double vaxxed and we'll have to wear our masks and social distance. But come and ready to enjoy each other's companies. We're still going to try and record it and to post it onto the Facebook site. I guess our only question really is, do we still invite Rascal and Singer to join us? It would be rather difficult at this point, I think, to deny them the opportunity to continue being part of the service. I sent out a notice earlier this week that talked about Adele McCallum celebrating her 89th birthday. I think I might have put in 88, but it's 89th. And Randall McFarland's 100th is coming up on the 16th. But really received a note, an email from Adele, his daughter, about Randall's health. And it has now taken a downturn and he is in palliative care. So she asked that we not send cards or make phone calls to Randall. So we need to keep him in our prayers, and Verly will keep us updated about his health. The other announcement was about the World Day of Prayer service. That's always on the first Friday in March. Bernice Duncan sent me a notice about where you can get it. I did tell you it's rather long. I did tell you where you could get it on the YouTube or even on some TV channels that we have, but it was all there in the email if you want to watch it. And now let us get the attention of God's ear with a few words. We picture the mountaintop experience of the disciples chosen to go up to the mountaintop with you, Jesus, to receive a new vision. But it wasn't what was expected. We're told that they were awed and frightened. They didn't know what to do. One wanted to build special festival booths for Moses, Elijah, and Jesus, you, where people could come to receive healing and blessing. It would have been so easy to stay up on the mountain and never again to descend to the hungering valley below. But you have work for us to do. We are called to receive the blessing, not for ourselves alone, but to give it to others, to offer healing, forgiveness, compassion, hope, and peace. These are difficult things to do in the face of the anger and hostilities that seem abound in our world. But we're not alone. You are with us in the Spirit. And just as we've asked for healing in the prayers that we will offer for others, so we are too the recipients of your love and strength. So make us open to feeling the power of this love flooding over us, coursing through our veins, encompassing our spirits. May we let strength and hope abide in us, and then be prepared to go and bring that blessing to others. God of compassion, what are you thinking when you see the violence among your people that seems to be increasing, especially in this past week in the Ukraine? We hope you see us compassionately standing with them in whatever we can, because we believe that we are called to do this. It is what discipleship means, whether that's personally or even as a country. And may we also stand with those closer to us who are recovering from surgery or facing it, traveling for treatments, worried about health issues that can't be explained, have trouble meeting monthly bills, those with relatives in the Ukraine who are worried for their safety, those caring for loved ones and those being cared for, and for Randall and his family. All these things, and those we keep close to our hearts, we hold up to you so that we may be shown the way to take in faith and in love. Amen. The challenge now is to come down from the mountain with a mountain-like faith, to walk on God's paths as bright and shining lights, to live in God's ways with faith, hope, and love informing all we do and say. So let's go out into the world knowing that Christ will be with us and will never leave us, that the Spirit will renew the image of God within us in new and exciting ways.